You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 141. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Are you feeling stuck in your career? If so, you are absolutely in the right place. Welcome and thank you for joining me for today's episode where we are going to dive into the reasons why you may be feeling stuck and what you can do about it. This episode is inspired by the work that I have been doing with lawyers over the past 6 years in my coaching practice. We are going to dive into the reasons, the themes, the trends that I have seen among the lawyers that I have worked with that have them feeling stuck. And we're going to talk about how to move forward in those situations. Invariably, the lawyers that I have worked with are brilliant, thoughtful, hardworking, ambitious, funny, committed lawyers who want to create professionally an impact that is often beyond what they are achieving when they first reach out to me. In many cases, these lawyers are also trying to balance their professional work with their personal lives. And often they are parents to children who need them at home. And what they're striving to create is excellence professionally while fostering a supportive environment for their family at home. When they reach out to me, often it's because they've hit a bottleneck. They feel stuck and they don't know how to move forward. Now, I mentioned they are smart and ambitious, and most of the time they have tried multiple approaches that didn't work before they reach out to me. They may have made adjustments at work, adjustments at home. They may have tried speaking to mentors. Some of them have reached out to counselors. And what they find is that even though they were able to make some progress, what they weren't able to achieve is the results that they were hoping to achieve. Adjustments that they made offered some relief, but they didn't necessarily address the underlying problem. They found that mentors were supportive, but they weren't able to be completely frank with them. And sometimes they felt like their mentors had a certain vision for them or a certain concept of who they thought they were. And the lawyers that reached out to me wanted a more impartial perspective. Sometimes they found that counselors were able to help them deal with some of the anxiety that they were experiencing or other emotional components of the work they were doing. But what they really wanted was a focus on career strategy and to develop a path moving forward. What the lawyers are craving when they reach out to me are a long-term solution. They want a process to follow. They want a path forward. And they often feel alone and stuck and like they want someone who can literally walk alongside them and help them navigate through a really tough decision or a challenge. Now, in my own experience as a practicing lawyer, I reached out and worked with a coach when I was going through a transition. I had had many challenges on the way, as you can expect as a lawyer, navigating the challenges of an articling student and then a junior lawyer and transitioning jobs and having children. And so I understand what it's like to have those challenges and to feel like you really want support in moving forward, but you don't really know who the right person is to reach out to. And I can remember reaching out to a counselor at one point who was specialized in working with lawyers. And I sat down in front of them and explained my situation. And the counselor turned back to me and said, 85% of the people who sit in your chair, I was in private practice at the time, are in private practice and they leave private practice within 6 months. And I felt a little bit disappointed because at the time I wasn't interested in leaving private practice. I just wanted to find a way to do it better. And so I felt like the real reason why I was there wasn't really being dealt with. And you may find the same thing. You may have tried speaking with mentors, with a counselor, with family members, with friends, with colleagues. You may have made the adjustments and you still feel like there's something that is holding you back. And so what I'm hoping to do today is to help you uncover some of the reasons why you may be feeling stuck and, of course, what you can do about it. Now, based on the experience that I've had working with lawyers over the past several years, I have seen that their challenges basically boil down to falling into one of three buckets. Now, these buckets are not airtight containers, and what you may find is that you have some challenges that lie in each of the buckets at any given time. But if you're really feeling stuck, you might ask which of these buckets most accurately reflects the challenges that you're currently facing. So if you're in a stuck state right now, or at some point in the future, if you find yourself getting stuck, I would invite you to follow today's episode and identify where it is that you see yourself. And once you identify the problem that you're having, it becomes so much easier to then identify the solution. So I mentioned there are three buckets. The first of those buckets is the transition bucket. Now, this is the bucket that involves making a job transition. So either you're in a job and you want to change jobs, but you're not quite there yet. Some job transitions are milestone transitions that happen for every lawyer. That would be something like graduating from law school and starting your first law job. If you work at a law firm, it may be transitioning from articling student to associate or associate to partner. Some other transitions that you may experience are situational, right? You may be moving from one city to another, and so you need to transition your job. Some job transitions are motivated by moving away from something that you aren't enjoying. So for example, you may be in a job where you can list out all the reasons why you do not want to be there, and you feel a sense of urgency to move forward based on wanting to move away, right? You feel unhappy, unsatisfied, unfulfilled. You feel like there's something wrong with where you are, and you're investigating your options for that reason. This can happen when a job maybe never fit well in the first place and it just gets increasingly worse. Maybe your job was fine, but then there was a big shift in the makeup of your practice group, and all of a sudden you find that you feel a bit lost, you feel unhappy. Some decisions are motivated by you wanting to move towards something. It's not so much that you don't like where you are, but you see yourself thriving more in a different environment. And so it may be that you're in a particular practice area now, and you see that something different would be better suited to your interests and your skill set. And so you're moving toward that as opposed to so much moving away from where you are. And sometimes it's a combination of both of those things. And in some cases, the decision to transition is made for you. And so you may be let go. If you're an articling student, you may not be hired back. And so the transition is something that you must undertake, whether or not that was a position that you liked. Now, when it comes to job transitions, there are many things that may keep you feeling stuck. Often it's uncertainty. So if you're in a job and you could stay there indefinitely, you don't love it, you don't hate it, you're not really sure where that path is leading you, often the biggest block to you doing anything about it is that uncertainty over whether a new role would be better for you, or if you would just be trading in one job where you're not particularly happy for another where you're not particularly happy, but it may cost you. It may cost you relationships. It may cost you the level of compensation that you're currently receiving. It may cost some other factor. Sometimes you might feel guilty about wanting to leave a job where you know that your employer has invested in you. You may be very engaged and committed to the clients that you're working with. You may have files, trials, deals that you're working on, and you don't want to leave them behind. You may also feel like you're invested, that you've invested a lot of your time and you've invested in these relationships, and you don't want to lose those and risk them to move towards something that you may not like even once you get there. And of course, there's always this hope that things will improve. And ultimately, what it boils down to when you feel stuck about the job that you're in is that what you want is clarity about what it is that you want for your career and the confidence to set in motion the process that you would need to follow in order to create that. So that's one bucket, is the job transition bucket. And that's where I help a lot of my clients make a transition from job A to job B so that they can move out of something that they don't love and move into something that they love more. Now, another area where lawyers can really struggle is in the bucket of practice management. So in a way, this follows that first bucket. If you know that you are in the right job, but the job itself is feeling uncomfortable, then you may be in that practice management bucket. And typically, this is when the way that you're practicing feels really difficult, more difficult than it needs to be. Your day-to-day might feel unbearable. It might feel untenable, unsustainable. And you might be able to relate to some of these characteristics. You feel like your practice is reactive. You feel stressed a lot of the time. You have a hard time letting go of work. So you either are at work all of the time, or you have long hours and then you go home and you're still thinking about work. You might find that your life feels unbalanced between work and life. You might feel like you're on a roller coaster of feast or famine. Your workflow is unpredictable and you're either working like your hair is on fire, or you are slow and you're wondering if you've done something wrong. Why aren't your clients giving you work? You may find that you have lots to do and yet you're procrastinating and having trouble getting motivated. You may find that you overcommit. You take on too many projects and then you're scrambling to get them done, and you find that you're underperforming. The quality of your work isn't a reflection of what you're truly capable of, but you've set yourself up for that situation by saying yes to everything instead of being more discerning and sometimes saying no at the risk of letting other people down or seeming like you're not 100% committed. You may also have a general feeling of unease. You can't quite put your finger on it, but you're always feeling a little bit edgy. And you might find that your personal life really suffers as a result of the amount of time and commitment that you have to work. And so at the younger stages, you might find it impacts on your ability to have a meaningful relationship with a partner outside of work, relationships with your friends and your family. As you get older and maybe have a family of your own, you might find it's really hard to balance your commitment to your children, to your partner. You may find that your interests start to really wane in things outside of work. You may find that your relationship with yourself starts to suffer, that you're not properly taking care of your health, either your mental health, your physical health. And so when it comes to practice management, there are a lot of reasons why you can get stuck in this type of setting. And number one is that you might find that you just don't have time to figure things out. You're so busy jumping from task to task, putting out fires, that you never really have that quiet time to take a step back and think about what it is that's going on in your practice. Now, for many lawyers, nobody ever teaches you how to run a practice. And so you've been building it kind of, there's that expression, build the airplane once you're already in the air, or something like that. That's how you might feel about your practice. You're just piecing the pieces together as you go along. And what you find is you've got this mishmash of skills and strategies, but you haven't really thought through how you can make them work most efficiently together. You may naturally struggle with organization and procrastination, and often that's linked to perfectionism. Your standards are so high that sometimes you're afraid to get started on something because you know it's never going to live up to the standards that you've set for yourself. You might want so badly to succeed at work, to be a stellar lawyer, to keep your clients so happy that you put everything else on the back burner. And instead of creating a life and practice that you love, you end up feeling burnt out and resentful. You may know that boundaries are an issue. You may want to create better boundaries, but when it comes to actually implementing, you have no idea where to begin. You might feel like you're unsupported and unresourced. And if you're like some lawyers that I've spoken with, and crazily enough, more than one lawyer has told me this story, you may wish that something would happen to you. Often it will be a car accident. You wish that you would get kind of nicked on your way into work, maybe crossing the street. Not so bad that you actually suffer from a life-threatening injury, just something that is serious enough that you could end up in the hospital and unable to work and sort of having a legitimate, and I say that using air quotes so you can't see that, a legitimate reason to take a step back from work. And I'm not kidding. I have had a handful of lawyers over the years express that almost fantasy. And so if you can relate to that, then you are absolutely not alone. And so when it comes to practice management and feeling stuck, almost feeling like your practice runs you instead of the other way around, what it comes down to is really figuring out how to, number one, take a step back and create an infrastructure of systems and scheduling and workflow so that you can schedule your time strategically. It involves understanding the way your brain works, your executive functioning skills, and the way that you feel. Yes, your emotions matter here. And figuring out how to leverage your brain's natural way of working, leverage your emotions so that you can use them to your advantage instead of allowing them to hold you back. It means developing confidence in yourself to set boundaries and prioritize components of your life that are important to you as well as your work so that you're thriving both inside and outside of the office in a way that aligns with your goals. So that is the second bucket that I often will encounter lawyers in, which is the practice management bucket, how to take a job that they know they really want to be in, but to make it sustainable for them in the long run. Now, the third bucket is the one of leadership. And this is typically a bucket where I see lawyers coming out and reaching out to me after they've had a few years of practice under their belt, and they see that their practice is evolving in a way that they are taking on more of a leadership role, whether it's a role that is reflected by a title like partner, for example, or if they are senior associates or a senior leader within their organization. And sometimes there's not necessarily a title that goes with it, but they've evolved in their practice in a way that they are leading. And what this looks like is a shift in your practice where some of the skills that got you to where you are no longer the skills that are going to get you where you want to go. So, for example, if you got to the level that you're at currently by working really hard, putting in long hours, you might find that you're not able to reach that next level simply by putting in more hours. That's not going to solve the problem. Maybe you don't have those hours to begin with because you're already working at your maximum capacity, but also doing more of what you're doing currently isn't going to allow you to evolve to that next level of leadership. Another challenge that can hold you back at this stage is imposter syndrome, thinking that you're not really ready or you lack the confidence to step into that role of leadership. You don't identify with that role for yourself. That can hold you back. You may find that you are trying to enter into that next level. You're trying to build a team. You're trying to delegate. You're trying to build the support around you that you need in order to scale your practice. And what you're finding is that you come up against a number of roadblocks along the way. You may find it really challenging to delegate. You want to save time, but you find that often it will cost you more time to delegate than it would to simply do it yourself. Other challenges that come up at this stage are defining yourself as a leader. So often lawyers that have reached a certain level of success have done so under the leadership of others, and they may look to leaders that they've had and think, none of these leaders really represents how I want to lead others. And so you grapple with the identity of becoming a leader because you don't want to associate yourself with the kind of leaders that you have worked under. And so forming an identity as a leader might be a challenge for you. It may also be that you find that there's challenges when you are trying to step into that role as a leader and you're dealing with some of the feelings of resentment and frustration that you can experience when you don't have adequate support in your role. And this can be support in the sense of building a team beneath you. It can also be building that support that you need laterally among other decision makers within your organization. And what you might find is that you want to take a seat at the table. You want to have your voice heard, But you may find that you have values that are in conflict with the others in your organization who are making decisions. You may find that there are personality conflicts where you have a hard time voicing what you need, what you want, your vision in that environment. And you find potentially that your goals may not align. You may also find that you want to make changes about the way that things are done and not have to say that you want, right? It may be that you need to make a decision as to whether you stay in the environment that you're in currently, or if you need to move into a different organization in order to have what it is that you want, to have the opportunity and the support to create the type of practice that you want to create. And what can happen at this level is that you may feel isolated because you don't really know who you can turn to. You may not have peers that you are able to turn to. You may find you can't really turn to management because they are part of the problem that you are dealing with. You may find that nobody really understands what it is that you are going through. You may feel frustrated because you keep trying, you're trying different approaches, and it's just not moving forward. You may find that you feel like you should have things figured out by now and you don't. So you may even feel frustrated with yourself or that you're not moving fast enough. And another component, and this is taking a different approach. So there are a number of challenges to stepping into that leadership. And another challenge that I often see among the lawyers that I work with isn't so much the challenge of stepping into and pursuing leadership, but rather the pace at which they're going. And that can happen if you have a family, for example, and this is where I see it most often, is you have a family and you want to be committed to them and you want to allocate a certain amount of time to your family, and that leaves less time available to allocate to your professional work. And so you do want leadership, but you want it at a different pace. And that can sometimes cause a challenge for you in terms of knowing how to proceed going forward. So what you might find at this stage is that there's a shift in identity for you that can feel awkward. And what you're looking for in support when you reach out to me or other coaches is that feeling of being helped and supported as you move through the awkwardness so that you can evolve into your strongest form of leadership so that you can make the impact that you feel compelled to make in your career. Another component of that is dealing with the fear and the uncertainty and the self-doubt that can come along when you take full responsibility. And that feeling of dealing with uncertainty and being exposed, and all of that is falling under that third bucket, that category of leadership where you're really maturing professionally and you want support through that process. So you can see in each of these cases why it is that you may be feeling stuck. And as you're listening, I would invite you to think about which of those categories best reflects the challenges that you're facing currently in your practice and where you may be getting stuck. And as I mentioned earlier, it may be that you have challenges in each of those three buckets because as you evolve and you change jobs, you find the one that best suits you, then you optimize your practice by dialing in the practice management and getting that balance and setting your boundaries. And then you evolve as your leadership skills evolve and you take that ownership stance within your organization. And then what happens is that will often lead to another transition. And so you can see how this is a cycle. You can also see how different components may be apparent at any given time. And so ask yourself where you most strongly identify. And when you're able to place yourself in one of those buckets, then what you have done is you have now taken that very first step toward getting unstuck. You have identified the problem. The problem may be the job that you're in. It may be the way that your practice is or is not optimized. And it may be that there's a leadership problem here, that there's a capacity for you to step into and you're struggling in that process. This is a significant step to getting unstuck because now that you have defined the problem, you get to move on to step 2, which is to resolve the problem. Now, I'm going to outline a very simple 4-step process for you to get unstuck. It is simple. It is not easy, but that first step is identifying the problem. And the second step is to imagine what will be different for you when your problem is solved. Now, this is going to look different for everybody, depending on the stage you're at, depending on the problem that you're struggling with the most, depending on where you're stuck. I would invite you to imagine right now what your life would look like if you were able to solve that problem. So imagine you were able to have a job where you felt more fulfilled. Imagine that you were able to have a practice where you had that sense of balance and that sense of confidence, that you could manage your practice proactively, that you weren't constantly feeling stressed and reactive. Imagine that you step into that leadership role with the confidence that you have to lead in alignment with your values, to accomplish and create the impact that you want to create at work. So imagine what that looks like for you. And here I would invite you to spend as much time as you can. Maybe you can spend that time dedicated to journaling and outlining exactly what that would look like for you. You may not have the luxury of doing that, so it might be something that you think about while you're out on a walk, while you're waiting outside the school for your kids, waiting for them to get out of class. Maybe it's something that you think about as you're folding the laundry. Maybe it's something that you think about when you are driving. I mean, there's lots of times where your mental space is not otherwise occupied. And I would invite you to imagine best case scenario, what that looks like for you, and to get really granular about what that looks like. Because once you have done that, then you get to move on to step 3, which is to guess at the solution to your problems. You want to work your way backwards. Look at the result that you're trying to create and then work your way backwards in terms of what you think you need to do to get there. And this is an area where I find so many of my clients are so much more resourceful than they give themselves credit for. We may be having a conversation. They tell me something that they want to build or create, or a goal that they have. And we start thinking about how it is that they can achieve their goal. And they will ask me for my opinion. And I'm more than happy to share my opinion. But I always want to start with you. I always want to start with what you already know and some of the steps that you already think you may be able to take, because chances are the steps that you identify for yourself are really, really good, productive steps that will get you to where you want to be. And I think we can often discount our own ideas. We don't think that they're the best ideas. We think that there must be someone else out there who knows better than us. Maybe this is from legal training, always looking for the precedent, always looking for the case, always looking for the formula. But what if you already have the formula within? What if you already have some really good ideas that you could act on? So that is where I would invite you to focus your energy in step 3, is to imagine all the steps that you would need to create in order to get to where you want. So for example, if the idea is that you want to transition jobs, chances are you can think of a number of steps that you could take in order to make that transition. Steps such as informational interviews with people who seem to have an interesting job. Steps such as doing that perfect day exercise and listing out all the features that you would love to have in your job. You might start with the job you have and list out all the things that you love about it. You might also make a list of all the things you don't love. What are some of the deal breakers that you don't want to step into in a new role? Maybe it's getting your CV updated. Maybe it's writing a cover letter. Maybe it's reaching out to organizations where you really see yourself wanting to work. So there's a lot of things that probably come to mind that you already know that you could make out into a list, and from there start to take actions on those items that you've already listed for yourself, which leads us to step 4, which is to take steps, right? And there can sometimes be a really big gap between the prep work, right? The initial work of identifying the problem, imagining where it is that you want to go, thinking about what steps you would need to take, and then actually taking those steps. And I think that's where a lot of lawyers get stuck, is actually taking action, because that's when it starts to feel really uncomfortable. You're no longer in your head, which is where lawyers are very comfortable. We're all very comfortable thinking and planning and strategizing and troubleshooting, but sometimes that can hold us back from taking action, which is where you're going to get the most data. When you start taking action, you're going to see what feels good and what doesn't feel good. You may be applying for 2 different jobs and you get 2 interviews. And for one of those interviews, you think, oh, this is amazing. I would love to have this job. This feels great. And for the other one, you're almost thinking, ooh, I hope I bomb that interview because I can't imagine myself working there. This is all data. And this is data that will help you move forward. It will help you make decisions that are right for you. So just to summarize, the 4 steps that will get you unstuck is number 1, identify which bucket you're in. Is it a job transition? Is it a practice management issue? Is it a leadership challenge? Once you've identified which bucket you're in, you've now identified the problem. So what is it that is holding you back? What is the challenge here? So move into step 2. What would it be like for you if you were to overcome that challenge? What would be the perfect scenario for you? Step 3 is guessing at the solutions. What could they possibly be? And then step 4 is implementing actions that will help you get closer to your vision. Now, you may be questioning why it is that you feel stuck when everybody around you seems to be moving happily along in their practice. Now, first of all, I would love to dispel the rumor that everybody is moving on as happily as they seem to from the outside, because I think often we will compare our insides with other people's outsides, not realizing that a number of people that you may think are not struggling are struggling in some manner. So number 1 is to recognize that you are absolutely not alone and that many lawyers are questioning their careers. They are questioning their practice. They are struggling with that transition into leadership. I would also offer to you that if you are feeling stuck, rather than seeing this as a negative, I would invite you to view this as a positive. This is your body's way of sending you a signal through an emotion, feeling stuck. It is your body's way of signaling to you that something needs to change. It is letting you know that you are in a position that maybe isn't sustainable for you in the long run, that it's not the best place for you to be. It is your body's way at almost an unconscious level to look out for you and your future and to provide you with valuable information that you can use to move forward. Now, if you are a human, which I know you are, but you may have had this experience of your body sending you a signal, right? It's like you've got that feeling in your gut. It may be really faint and you ignore it. Or you have that voice inside your head that keeps offering the same suggestion. It's time to leave. It's time to leave. Or it's time to get on top of your practice. We need to start setting boundaries around here, whatever those whispers are. And you may choose to ignore them. And what you are likely going to find is that the voice only gets louder. And you can imagine a toddler, right? You're in the grocery store and you've got your toddler with you and they're pointing to the chocolate bar in the grocery store lineup, right? Of course, that's where the grocery stores have all the chocolates. They're, placed nice and low to the ground, just in clear sight for a nice short toddler. And they might ask, and you might say no, and you can ignore them. And what's eventually going to happen is that they'll get louder. And instead of it being a whisper, a nudge, a request, it then escalates into a full-blown tantrum. And you can imagine that this could happen to you, but at a different level, right? It's like you're at work and things are just escalating and you try to ignore it, you try to keep moving forward, but eventually something happens that is the equivalent of a tantrum, right? This is where lawyers might experience burnout, self-sabotage, other things that can be your way of reacting, even though at a conscious level, you're not necessarily doing something that you are trying to do, but at an unconscious level, the fact that you're unhappy, the fact that you need to make a change, it's finding its way through you. It's finding its way forward. So what I'd invite you to do then is to pay attention and listen to those nudges, listen to those feelings of stuckness, and ask what those feelings are trying to tell you. Now, if you are feeling stuck, then chances are you can see options that are ahead of you, but those options bring up feelings that hold you back, feelings of doubt, fear, uncertainty, guilt, or some other feeling that prevents you from moving forward. If you felt otherwise, chances are you wouldn't be feeling stuck. You wouldn't really be seeing these so much as challenges. Instead, you'd be more excited. You'd be moving forward toward those different options. So I would ask you to consider what it would take for you to feel empowered and excited to move forward. Sometimes the biggest challenge is simply carving out the time to think. And then the second biggest challenge is, as I mentioned before, taking action that will create an impact. Now, I would invite you to consider that it is all within your power. that whatever choice you decide to make moving forward, you cannot go wrong. Now, there's many things you can do to help yourself move forward. You can get help from somebody who has been there and done that. You can get help from a coach, whether it's me or another coach that you choose to work with, who can take you through the process to analyze where you are, to figure out where you want to go and how you want to move forward. You can ask yourself these questions. DIY does work, but sometimes it doesn't. And if you find that you're unable to move forward on your own, then I would invite you to reach out to somebody and get that additional support. Find somebody who can help you to make priorities and move forward. Now, I would also invite you to consider what difference it will make for you. If you are in that land of stuckness and you're waffling between staying where you are and going somewhere else, and you're driving yourself crazy, you're driving your spouse crazy, you're driving your dog crazy if you're talking to your dog about this. But if you're finding that you're on this constant thought loop and you're recycling the same arguments, you're recycling the same decision, then I would invite you to find somebody who can help you move forward and to think about the difference that will make for you. And getting unstuck can result sometimes in a very clear external change. That might be that you move from job A to job B. It might be that you develop systems that drastically change the way that you manage your practice. It may be that you receive a new title, partner, senior, something that reflects your level of management and ownership within your organization. But sometimes I would also offer that getting unstuck is an inside job. So it may be that you stay in the job that you're in, but you stop second guessing yourself as to whether or not you should be there or somewhere else. And you choose to be where you are, and you make the best of that situation because you realize what it is about that job that you love and how you're going to make it work for you. You may have a practice that is really busy and it's really crazy. And yes, your life feels out of balance sometimes. However, you may also accept that your practice will be messy. And instead of judging yourself for it, you accept it, you celebrate it, and you're able to move forward. Maybe it looks the same from the outside, but you feel completely different on the inside. It may also be in a leadership role, for example, that you learn to see yourself as a leader. And your actions may be exactly the same. You may be delegating, you may be leading, you may be creating the vision, you may be taking risks, you may be doing all of those things. And maybe those are all things that you were doing before. But instead of doing it again with that second guessing or that self-doubt, you do it with greater confidence, a greater sense of ease in the execution of these actions. So whether your change is an external one, whether your change is an internal one, or both, you feel a shift in your practice. You no longer feel stuck. You are able to move forward with clarity and with confidence, and you know how to get unstuck if it happens again, which I'm guessing at some point it probably will. Now, you might be scared to fail. If you're making a bold decision, that might be holding you back. And what I would invite you to consider is that even if you fail, it would be worth it. You do not need to do this alone. You do not need to do this perfectly. And every aha moment that you have, every conversation that brings you closer to understanding what it is that will make you feel fulfilled, even every failure that you experience will give you data and information and the opportunity for you to learn and grow. And with every step that you take, you make progress. And even though it may look the same from the outside, from the inside, you are no longer the same person that you were before you undertook your experiment. You are no longer that person who is staying stuck and feeling powerless in the face of an obstacle or a decision. You are now moving forward and getting traction and getting that knowledge that you need to move forward. Now, if you have any doubt, I just want to assure you that I have faith in you, and I know that you have what it takes to succeed in your career and in your life. That includes changing where you work, changing how you work, and how you become the leader that you know you're capable of becoming. I also want you to know that you are not alone. You are not starting from scratch. Every transition you make, you bring with you everything that you've built up until this point. And I can help you with your transitions. I can help you get unstuck, and there are others in your community who can help you as well. I would invite you, for starters, to go through the podcast episodes that I've created in this podcast series, there are materials that will help you with transitions, that will help you with time management, that will help you with leadership. You can start there if those are areas where you see yourself wanting to get unstuck, where you're having challenges. You're also, of course, welcome to reach out to me. I would love to help you. I would love to hear from you. We can set up a phone conversation or a Zoom conversation. You can tell me what it is that you're struggling with, and I can tell you how I can help you. And it doesn't have to be me. It could be another coach. It could be someone in your community, but I would invite you to reach out and get the support that you need. You do not need to feel stuck. You are 100% capable of moving forward. And I know that you are capable and deserving of creating a career and a life that you absolutely love. So thank you so much for joining me here this week for the podcast. I loved this opportunity to connect with you and to share some of the themes, the trends that I have seen in my coaching practice. And if you would like support in getting unstuck in your practice, by all means, please do reach out. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to reconnecting with you next week. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.